live. We did it.
Yay, we're real.
We're actually real here in the flesh. I'm Angie Callan.
I'm Susie Tomanchuk.
And our first leadership lesson that you may not always think about is as leaders, we don't always have our shit together. So This morning has been a small comedy of Angie doesn't have that together errors. But as usual, Susie and I are here to sound off about leadership conversations that should be happening and unfortunately don't. So I'm just going to toss it over to you, to Susie, and what's on your mind today?
Yeah, this topic comes up all the time, and there's so many angles to it, and it's feedback. And the reason I wanted to talk about it today is I had a client yesterday, and nobody can see my calendar, right? And
anonymous remains anonymous.
Yes. We talked about, she was talking about feedback that she got, and she got feedback from somebody that reports to her, from somebody that reported to them. And so we were talking about the responsibility of that feedback and responsibility as a leader. What should her direct report have done about feedback about her boss to either continue to have it, filter through, or should she have been managing a little bit differently than just to take the feedback and give it to her?
Oh, okay. How did that conversation go?
Yeah. So this leader took full ownership of the feedback and got really consumed by the feedback. Like, that's not my intent to make everybody feel like they're on pins and needles. I just want to make sure people are on the right track. And so I asked questions like, well, should you be in the weeds? And is the information valid? But then what was the expectation of the person that works for you? Should they have helped those people understand instead of like basically taking notes and giving the feedback back to her? And so she was doing the right thing by taking responsibility for the feedback. But I still think like there's a bit of, all right, let's think about the chain of the feedback. And if I should have gotten that direct, or if that manager should have managed that relationship a little different. What do you think?
That's what I was thinking about. I'm thinking about it's not so much about the feedback. It's more about how it was acquired and what was done with it, or what wasn't done with it, that I flag in that situation.
Yeah. And I feel like the thing about feedback is there's so much feedback coming to people these days because they do surveys and how do employees feel and all of those things. And so I think there's this element of, I have to take all the feedback, I have to look at it as factual, and I need to adjust me. And I don't believe that fully. And I think we've gone to the wrong end of it.
I feel like the feedback situation is feast or famine. And in like many things that feel like they are polarized in society, it's either like you're either getting it all the time, too much of it, and not being able to, filter it, or you're not getting any of it except for every 365 days. And there should be like a nice little pendulum swing from like 5 to 7 that should happen in there where we can get feedback that's leverageable and not overwhelming. But also, I think the big thing, and this for some reason is where my head is going with this, is we should be able to have open conversations about this stuff and not feel like we've got to be like, oh, here's what's on the sheet of paper, so I don't have to tell people something they don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we fall into the two extremes of either not saying it at all, except for when we're given the performance review platform to do it. And then it's like, whoa, or it's coming across too much because we don't feel like we can have incremental conversations. That's been something I've been coming across, is this idea of not speaking up. But it's almost the other side of this coin.
Yeah. So while you were talking, I was thinking like there's the responsibility of a leader to take feedback and show the team how you consume that and what you do with it. There's also the responsibility of going, as you go, interesting, because I always say feedback is data around what it's like to live outside of you, because that is unavailable to you. You will never experience what it's like to experience you. And whether you believe the feedback or not, it's still their data. And I guess I shouldn't use the word data because that implies that it's objective and factual. But when you think about it, I want people to go, oh, interesting. That's interesting that's how they experience me, even though that's not my intention. Interesting. And what do I do with that?
Yeah, I like the idea of data, but I agree with you. You have to be cautious of looking at this as subjective, actual analytical data versus or objective analytical data versus subjective observations of what it's like to live outside
Mhm.
of your body. And I think you have to be cautious not to just take every single one of those things to heart, but to figure out what you can actually learn from it. And in
Mhm.
some way, that's how it can feel a little less like overwhelming
Mhm.
because we have to remember there's always perspective around feedback.
Yes. Yes. We're all
And there's a
biased. Let's
bias.
all
Yes,
admit we're all
bias.
biased. And
Uh,
even I'll give an example of how our biases show up. I was going to ask people in my network to make some more introductions. And I looked at the list that I created for myself, and there were more men on it than women. And I thought that's super interesting. I'm more comfortable being bold and doing a bold ask. And I'm not trying to say this is not gender, but that bias, I was like, wow, I'm really biased
yeah,
to like this question and who I feel more comfortable asking. So with that lens, we are all biased in our feedback that we give.
yes,
And we may be more bold to somebody over somebody else, depending on their
yeah,
reaction, our relationship to them, et cetera,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and then when this comes into leadership, which by the way, I see a few of you watching out there, leadership conversation no one prepares you for. If you've got burning
Mhm.
questions, throw them in chat and we will just sound off about them. We're talking about, I would say, feedback and different perspectives on what it's like to interact with us since we never get to interact with us outside of our own mind. And it's interesting to me to think about the fact that as leaders, we have a responsibility to do uncomfortable things,
Yeah.
like give someone feedback through the appropriate channel instead of copping out.
Mhm.
Sorry, we're just going to kind of
Yeah.
call that spade the spade, or communicating through difficult situations, whether it's feedback, whether it's a decision making process, in order to move an initiative or move a team forward. And I feel like that can oftentimes get lost. So these, like the biases, the discomfort of communicating things people may not want to hear, are all getting in the way of our
Mhm.
ability to lead and communicate effectively.
Yeah. So we're talking about this way. Let's stay on that topic of
Okay.
giving feedback
Oh,
because
yeah.
our biases, and I always talk to leaders about this too, is we make it more high stakes or more uncomfortable by not handling it right away.
Yes.
We will like go, oh, I'll talk about that later. It's been too long. It's like whatever excuse you want to make. And then the person does it again or they annoy you. And you want to, in the moment when you're annoyed at them, it's so much easier for you to give them that feedback then because that emotion can like be your courage.
And
And
that
that's the
emotion is
worst
gonna create
time.
a bias in how you deliver it.
Yes,
So,
exactly. Right. And they don't even know that you've been living with it for so long or you've been putting it off. But it's like, and it might have to do with your relationship with that person and whether you have authority to give them feedback or if you had all the facts or you're just uncomfortable.
yeah. And, there's an interesting correlation here that this, we're talking about leadership in the business and professional sense. All of this applies at home. Because how many of you have ever just let something fester
Oh my
and
gosh.
then and or lashed out in the moment, right?
Yeah.
Both of those are extremes, and the
Yeah.
bias of either the emotionally charged moment or the bias of a festering it enables feedback to probably come out in a way that you may not have intended, or more importantly, in a way that isn't best for the receiving party. And as
Yes.
leaders, whether it's at home or at work, I believe it's our responsibility to communicate to someone the way they will best receive it and not force them to communicate with us in the way that we necessarily do. There's a happy medium there, kind of a
Yeah.
little bit. But receiving feedback well is also very heavily impacted by the way and the timing of its delivery.
Yes, fully, completely. And when you were talking too, I was thinking, we all have something that's festering right now. We do. It's just on the continuum of, whether it's worth saying it, especially at home. Is it
Yeah.
worth bringing up again, I wish you would put this away, or I wish you wouldn't leave your dishes in in the sink, or whatever those things are. And then you get to your boiling point, or in the book, Thanks for the Feedback, they talk about track switching, or one of the two. And that's when, and this happens all the time. And I always, when I'm mad and I bring up a topic finally with my partner and we're fighting about it, and if he switch tracks on me, I'm like, no, no, no. I brought this up. This is my topic. You don't get a switch track. Like, you have to bring that up on your own time. But no, this is mine. But we do that all the time.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
you think it's bad that I'm not taking out the trash, but
Well,
how
here's
about
what you
this?
do. And we low key do stuff like that at work. And it's interesting that I think you and I, because we do such complementary stuff, we find a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
And where a very similar conversation is showing up for me and a team I'm working with right now is they've created a space where everyone can be heard all the time, therefore no one is ever listened to. And that's where, like,
Oh.
if you're always a squeaky wheel, boy who cried wolf, or you're always giving feedback in a way that isn't appropriately timed or positioned for receipt, it ends up falling on deaf ears, because by trying to include everyone, you've actually excluded everyone.
Yeah. Is that because it's kind of like when you ask for feedback and people are like, "Okay, let me think about something,"
They
versus
feel forced
something
to answer the
happens.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then they say that if you want accolades, ask for feedback in the moment. Like, "How did I do in that meeting?" And that person will go, "Great," because they have nothing that they noticed. But if you say, "Hey, I'm going into this meeting. I'm really working on asking good open-ended questions. How will you give me feedback on that?" That gives them the opportunity
Yes.
to observe you. And so it's kind of the same thing as you're saying. If somebody's asking for give me feedback all the time, they're going to manufacture it.
Mhm. Same with, in the version I'm experiencing is, if you're a leader who has a team and you're always asking the team for input in a roundtable format, you've basically set the expectation that they're supposed to give some kind of input,
Yeah.
which essentially devalues meaningful input because they feel like they have to have something to offer. Which is why if you say to somebody like, "Hey, how did I do?" That's a little bit of a closed question. It's not
Yeah.
fully yes or no, but it's limiting as far as the range in which it will invoke thought. And I'm a big fan of, like, be curious, and, like, asking better questions
Yeah.
is a really powerful leadership tool.
Yes. It totally is. I mean, people discount how powerful that is. But, I just had somebody yesterday say, "How do you do that? How do you ask questions that really get me to think?" And so it definitely is an art, and it takes time to do. But yes, to do that, and so if you asked me to give you feedback right now, I'd be like, "Well, I you have a lot of books, on your shelves." Like, I'm gonna find something, but it doesn't
But
mean
it's
that
surface.
it was anything that bothered me, but now you've made me look at and make an
Yeah.
opinion of something.
Yeah. Uh, that is probably moot, but could be taken, you know? And I
Yeah.
don't know why you said something that I wanna we're gonna talk about AI for a minute. I know, it's annoying, gag me, but you said something that I think is important in this AI age, and that's the importance of asking more thoughtful, more human, better
Mhm.
questions, and the type of conversation that will invoke. This is one of the reason we still need to be connected to humans, is because if all you do is sit and talk to a large language model, you're gonna be in a closed loop of questions that
Yeah.
are of limited significance and limited thought provokingness. And this is also where I think as leaders and as teams, we have a really big opportunity to leverage that human skill of, being curious, asking better questions about it, and just distilling down whether or not we're solving the right problem. I think is also something to think about that's very relevant to feedback, but also just in the general nature of leadership. Are we solving the right problem, or are we just asking questions for asking questions' sake?
Yeah. It makes me wonder if it's a good cop out for leaders to just ask for feedback that way, because maybe they know that not asking good questions leads to not great feedback, and so it's just easier. Then you don't get critical feedback.
Yeah, it is actually, and it might be a subconscious cop out, or they know they're supposed to be asking for feedback, so they just ask for feedback instead of thinking about how and when.
Mhm.
Because the flip side of this, and we touched on this with the festering, but this is the problem with the other side of the coin, which is the every 365 days we have a performance review that is
Mhm.
an ecosystem where feedback is anticipated and supposed to be given. And because of that, I think for the recipient, it could end up making the feedback feel a lot more severe than it would have been if it was just dripped out over time. Because
Mhm.
now we're dumping them a snowball instead of a flake,
Yeah.
at the time that it occurred. And so I think that there's value to the performance review. But again, a lot of this is how we approach it. And that is a hard leadership thing in this day and age with all the things that we have to worry about.
Yeah. I you just made me think of, like, from the other side when my annual review is coming up, what an amazing strategy would be, because I put my head in my head when I was a leader giving performance reviews, and by the way, when I was doing that, that was the only time you gave feedback. Like, there
Yeah.
wasn't this
There was not
feedback on a regular
incremental feedback.
basis. No. So it was that. So what that meant was it was on me to think about good feedback, and that's hard to do, and of course you would only think about the last month because your
Yes.
your brain is limited, right? And so what a smart thing for people in the team of that leader is to feed them what they did that year, or what
Yeah.
they're, kind of like, hey, I know my annual review is coming up. Here's some stuff that I just wanted to remind you that I've worked on. And that would be so nice to me, because then I can
Mm.
remember and put those in there. And then
Yeah,
that would change my performance review to be more positive on that
yeah.
person.
Yeah, because really an annual performance review is really a quarterly review. It just only happens 1
Yes.
quarter a year, the quarter immediately preceding the performance review because our memories don't go back that
Yes.
far. There's actually a question or a kind of a statement asking for our thoughts in the chat that I
Okay.
like, and it goes back to what we were talking about with AI, which might take the conversation in another direction, but I think it's related and valuable. Somebody said that they feel like AI is going to reach a saturation point, and humans will start to feel like normal life without a screen is a luxury and move towards that. What are our thoughts on that?
As luxury, but what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Sorry, I had to read it again. It's almost like, okay, so I want to interpret the question. I think that you're starting to interact with this fictitious person that is a screen. And so we're now going to change the way we interact with humans,
Yep.
because we believe this is a real relationship that we have with ChatGPT or
Oh,
Claude
yeah.
or whatever,
There are many
right?
people who actually do think that. Yes.
I think that's very scary and true.
And I agree with the statement here that with the presence of AI, and we actually started seeing this even before AI came on the scene, because even just technology in general and social media has created a loneliness epidemic, at least in the US. Worldwide, loneliness is like off the charts, but people have the illusion of connection. It's just not real, authentic human connection. And I feel AI's come in and exacerbated that to the point that we're going to go swing back to old school channels of communication, small communities, live events, and things that give us outlets for clear human interaction to balance out the fact that like AI is here to stay.
Yeah. You know, I'm experimenting with Claude and I've been using ChatGPT, and
Me
I
too.
felt like I was cheating on ChatGPT. Like I'm afraid to turn ChatGPT off because I have a it's weird. Like I know it not to be true,
But
but
it has the feeling of knowing you have the feeling that it knows you.
yes, and it
Yeah,
doesn't. Yes.
right.
And so it's and my point is I'm a rational human being that knows that's not true, but I still can't it's hard
Yeah.
to get that
For me, it's
off.
more logistical than emotional. It's just like all of my stuff is in here. Now I have to go
Mm,
tell another cis human or another thing
yeah.
about it all, like for context. So that's funny you bring that up because literally this morning I was doing my first, like, let's say Claude project because people have been talking about how much better it is. So,
Yeah.
and to bring this back to like leadership conversations, no one prepared you for. No one prepared leaders out there for what do we do
Yeah.
with AI on our teams. We're
Yeah.
all experiencing that in real time. So I'm curious now that we're on this topic, what are you seeing? What's the narrative around AI in the team environment as you interact with leaders?
Yeah, I think people are starting to depend on how do I ask, what questions can I ask? What is my agenda? Here's my notes. And so I think that in order to be quick, people are using it as a kind of a partner for them, and they're not thinking about um, that it's not them thinking it through. And here's an example. There's actual research that says when you're watching a presentation and you take a picture of the screen because you're like, oh, that's really interesting, I want to remember that. Your brain, like they say that the people that do that remember less because they never
Yep.
go back to that photo, and they're really not paying attention in that moment because they're
Mhm.
saying, I'm going to come back to this. So the people that when you take a picture, you're actually getting less out of that presentation. Now, when you think about that, that's scary. So when you
Uh-huh.
take that to AI and just think about that, you are sending in a proxy as your leader, as being a leader. When you're using AI, you need to be very careful
Yes.
that you're allowing it to do the thinking for you.
The proxy is a great thing to think about and put that in the back of your head anytime you're using it because the proxy is where work slop comes from,
Mhm.
which we're seeing a ton of work slop,
Yeah.
content slop, sea of sameness, all that kind of stuff. And there's even been in the last year some companies out there who when I feel like we're in the AI gold rush still. And it
Yeah.
is the over index it, put it everywhere I possibly can because it can do absolutely everything, which is why I feel like this kind of like at some point that will contract a little and we'll find the happy medium, which is going to have a heavily human connection. And that comes down to teams, right?
Mhm.
We're never going to entirely replace human teams in many and most professional avenues. However, what we have to figure out as leaders is how to do what you just said is like keep the proxy in check or be intentional
Yeah.
about how much you proxy because what we're going to end up having to do is lead teams that have human and agentic or AI
Yes.
coworkers. That I
Yes.
think is going to be the challenge and
Y
figuring out how the humans drive those systems and where to proxy, where not, and how to like really, I think there's a level of intentionality that has gone above as far as like how to bring this in and how to build a team, not just in the AI age, but as AI comes in and works alongside of us.
Yeah. And how interesting too, if you give an assignment to a human employee and an AI bot, and they do it better or they do it faster, and how that will be a part of the feedback that you give to the human,
Mm.
because you're being critical of them in contrast to a non-human. Like what an interesting, like, are you gonna have to do, because you're not gonna do annual reviews the same, like,
Yeah,
this
it
is
actually
super
comes all the way
important.
back to feedback at the beginning of the conversation is
Yeah,
how is AI impacting the way we give feedback, when we give feedback, who we give feedback to, and what we give. Because we also know that one of the things AI is actually very good at is finding patterns in data that we may not have picked up on, which
yeah,
also means if you're using it to create feedback, you could end up giving somebody feedback that you as a human would never have observed. And I don't know how I feel about that. That's good. And also, that's potentially bad because if I didn't observe it, is it a fair feedback?
yeah. I think it goes back to how much feedback, because if you think about, you could ask everybody that interacts with you in your life, ask them to give you constant feedback,
They'll be
and
exhausted of that.
it would be exhausting. And what is the right balance
Yeah.
as leaders when we think about feedback? Is it the organic, like, how much do you ask? Who do you
Yeah.
ask? And how much do you take in?
And this has relevance. There's so many aspects of this to me that like crawl out to other things where it has relevance because I also think that what you just presented is very true even just in decision making. How often are we seeing people of all walks of life that have or they get into like decision analysis paralysis because they're just constantly consuming advice or constantly getting feedback because we have access to it.
Yeah.
And that is a slippery slope because now we're losing our own human critical thinking skills. And at some point, you do have too much information and you just need to make a decision, whether it's a leadership decision, a home decision, or how to use AI decision. We can't proxy decision making entirely to others, whether they're AI or other humans.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole 'nother topic around how much time we analyze decision making, but you're exactly right, is we need to find the happy medium in both
Mhm.
so that we can continue to, like, be able to make decisions, move forward, get feedback, move forward, and figure out how to be our best self after that, like, every day.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
I know. I feel like we're good at putting ourselves on a hamster wheel now. Or because there's just
Yeah,
so much information to gather all the time, you can
yeah,
stay in like a decision making cycle kind of perpetually versus and also this gets on like now we're going to get on one of my very common soapboxes which is the like the fear of making the wrong decision which then creates complete inaction and at
yeah,
some point you just got to go do the thing so you can get the actual real feedback of doing the thing speaking of feedback and see what happens and iterate from there. But that's the thing that I feel like as humans, we've gotten fearful of doing because we don't want to fail or we don't really think we know enough or we don't have all the information because we can get never ending information. Sometimes you just got to go do the thing.
yeah. Well, I think that's exasperated also by, we wanna collaborate with our peers, you need to bring this to, like, who needs to be a part of that decision and who makes that decision, and I think that because we wanna be nice colleagues and we don't wanna be the one, we rationalize, making those decisions based on that.
Yes.
It's very
Yes.
scary.
It
But
is.
as we go back to the AI and the feedback piece too, last time I was talking about it was Israel where they were doing a research on how people interact with Facebook. This was way back, and people had they didn't have access to Facebook this one day, and people started getting really anxious about it because they didn't have access until they realized that the whole country what had no access to Facebook, and that what it changed the emotion. People were like relieved. So I feel like there's a little bit of tension around AI and how to use it and how others are using it, and am I using it
Mhm.
the right way? That is also adding to the stress of feedback and
Yeah.
us as leaders.
Well, and what's interesting about this is I feel like most of the people I talk to we've been like early and like high adopters of AI. But if you just look at your average human. I guess I just considered us not average humans, Susie, but we already knew that. Adoption of AI on any level is really low percentage wise. Like, like even using it for your grocery list is a very, very low percentage of the population. And I think it's interesting, also tricky if we think about the workforce, because unless you're
Mhm.
5 years from retirement, you can't pretend it doesn't exist. But then I also think it makes me think and keep in check of the fact that, like, am I doing too much with it?
Yeah.
And what's the
Yeah.
like, what is the balance? And that's where I think it's like, there's a level of intention that we have to set and individually know kind of where our thresholds lie.
Yeah. It's such an interesting question because there was a professor that I heard at a conference, and he said he spends 6 to 7 hours a day in AI. And I was like, wow, that's super interesting. And to your point, there's people that don't even do anything with it right
Spend
now.
6 minutes a week.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is such an it's such an interesting time to, like, just be alive, own a business. And,
Mhm.
one of the reasons that Susie and I wanted to start doing this is because we do feel like there's a lot of conversations that should be happening out there that either aren't happening or we're not prepared to have as humans and as leaders. And, like, this is one aspect of it, because
Yeah.
there's no statute, right? There's no standard in
Mhm.
how we really adopt this, and we know we're going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
And then have to kind of, course correct a little bit, which is true of kind of anything in leadership, whether it's
Mhm.
AI, or oops, shouldn't have given feedback that way, or oops, should have
Yeah.
just given the feedback instead of copping out and passing on to a leader, or kind of whatever it is. And so for me, a really big I think there's like a central, like, one thing that sticks out to me in all of these different ways we've talked about something that is central is, like, owning your position as a leader and
Mhm.
all of the responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah.
Period. Good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah. And I agree with you, and have an opinion about feedback. And I think that you should sit down with yourself and really think about what would be a good cadence. Who do I need to get feedback from? How do I want to take feedback? If you're highly emotional and feedback really triggers you, which it triggers me, have a SOP for yourself where you take the
Yeah.
feedback and write it down and give yourself space and then come back to it. But if you do that outside of the feedback, then you can create an opinion for yourself about the best way you're going to do it. Because I think that the reason I wanted to talk about this is to your point about how it's leadership is layered. And we think that feedback, I hate when people talk about, well, I just need to get feedback or I need to give feedback. And that's like the discussion around feedback. There's so many more layers to what that
Mhm.
means and how that goes. And it's not a one and done. This is how you give it, this is how you receive it. And, here's the textbook SOP on how you do that. It's very personalized, and you have to decide how you're going to pursue that.
We can't forget there's a human on each side of that, which means
Mhm.
there is no standard process. It is going to be imperfect because we are imperfect, highly, highly unique people. And no matter what you're doing or trying to do in a leadership sense, that to me is the number one rule, is meet everyone where they're at and get to know them individually. When I work with a leader who's going into a new role, that's the very first thing we talk about, is how are you going to go get to know the people that you're leading at an individual level, understand what they're motivated by,
Yeah.
understand how and how often they want feedback, for instance. And that's where I feel like, again, the AI kind of creeps into this part of it too. But we cannot forget that humans hire humans, humans work for human, and that's never going to
Yeah.
change no matter what agentic thing sits aside in the cube next to us.
Yeah. Totally. And to that point, what came to mind for me is, the old kind of saying around, like, if you, as a woman, you ask your husband or boyfriend or your partner, um, does this make me look fat? And, you have to answer like that. And the reason why that's so important is because that person's just feeling insecure and they need somebody that loves them to tell them they look great. So
Yes.
sometimes
Men,
our
that is a relationship note for you to take. It is
yes,
not
exactly.
actually to
No
give a
pause.
truthful response.
Yes. But that's true in leadership, and that's why it's so important to be a human with a human is because sometimes you may need to go, "Oh, they don't need feedback right now. This is not the time for them. They're feeling
Yes.
really insecure or low. I need to be their cheerleader and give that feedback." Like, you have to
Later.
make a decision that's best for them.
Yeah.
So, I just wanted to make your point for you. That's the reason why you say that so fast, and you may not be truthful, but that's because you're serving that person for their needs in the moment.
And it doesn't mean you're lying to them. It's that because this to me comes down to, like, the timing and
Yes.
be the emotionally intelligent human that you were, like, designed to be. We all have it in there. Find it. There's a time and place, and it doesn't mean you're lying to somebody. You're giving them essentially what they asked for because
Yeah.
really, really good and a very simple example is when a woman asks, "Does this look okay?" or "Does this make me look fat?" They aren't actually asking for you to answer that question. They
Yes.
are asking to be kind of lifted up. And there's many situations in life and leadership where something like that happens, and we've got to filter. What
Yeah.
is the right way to handle this to serve the other person in the best way? And it may not just be laying it all out there for them in the real time.
Yeah, it is. And I think of another example. I did a keynote last week and I was not feeling great and it was a big audience and the computer I was using was having problems so I couldn't read my notes. So
Ugh.
there was more pauses that and I felt really like, oh, I just, that bugged me. And two of my daughters who are both adults were in the audience and I asked them afterwards, did I pause too much? And I wanted them to say no, but they said, Mom, you paused, but because you were not feeling great, like it made sense in context. Nobody is dwelling on that. And it wasn't like a thing that was bothersome. But yes, you did pause. And so they weren't being dishonest, but they were giving me the context that I needed in the moment.
It was a yes and
Yeah.
instead of just a yes. And
Mhm.
that is a big difference, right? Because the
Mhm.
context eases the blunt
Totally.
answer to the question, and delivery will change many things. And delivery is both timing and how. For instance, you mentioned you're not super, huge on feedback. Uh, I am depending on who it comes from. My husband is not one that I like feedback from, but it's also because his delivery isn't always great. He's
Yeah.
the, "Yeah, that makes you look fat," or, "Yeah, that makes you look stupid," and you're like, "Wow,
Yeah.
you totally missed the point." Like, over honesty isn't working right now. For me, I like constructive, like, "Here's what you're doing well," sandwich the feedback, and then, "Here's another what you did well." So, like, we'll be out, for instance, mountain biking is one of the places this comes up, and he'll just be like, "Oh, well, this is what you're doing wrong." And I'm like, "I feel like I'm freaking crushing this ride. Thanks." Now I'm in my head and he's like, "Oh, you're riding great." I'm like, "Why didn't you start with that?" And it's ridiculous and just so simple, but for me, it makes something negative a little bit easier to receive because I know it's not all bad.
Yeah. And he may be a better mountain biker than you, and so you're proud of yourself and how you do it, and then for him to say that to you, like, crushes you, and I'm not saying that that's true,
Oh, no,
but
but it's true because this is the same in a team, right?
yeah,
This is why it's so important to meet people with the context of them
yeah,
versus us, and that comes back to biases and trying to create some separation because if all you do is give feedback compared to you, that's not always fair.
yeah, and if you don't give very much feedback or you don't give feedback to your, direct reports often, and then when you do, that holds so much weight, more
Yes.
weight than you realize. And your intention might just be a just quick little thing, but that stays with them. They analyze it. They are like taken aback by it. So
Yep.
it's also how, when, and all of those things matter.
That's a huge one. is you've really got to think about your audience. And there's a million places where that's true, whether it's
Yeah.
feedback, whether it is a presentation, whether it's a job search, whether it's a team meeting. Think about who you are delivering to instead of being in your head about the fact that you have to deliver whatever the thing is.
Yeah. Totally. It's so interesting. I mean, it's so crazy because it all that amplifies the whole point we brought this up is because it's almost intimidating to really
Yeah,
think about how much feedback can have such an impact, both positively and negatively, depending
yeah.
on where, when, how, who. And so it's as leaders, you really need to not be paralyzed by the fact that that is the case,
Comes
but
with the
how do you do
territory.
it in a meaningful way?
Here is leadership conversations that no one prepares you for. A really hard truth that I think many leaders fail to understand. And I'm going to keep you all in suspense for a second because I think a big reason leaders fail to understand it is because many people who are put in leadership positions don't have the natural ability or even that actual natural desire to be leaders. It's just the way they've been forced up a ladder to grow
Mhm.
in their career.
Yeah.
And even natural leaders can fall into the following trap. Leadership isn't about you.
Mhm.
Sorry, it isn't. Yeah, you worked really hard to get there. Yeah, you got yourself the title. Yeah, you should be proud of it. But now you have been given the responsibility to steward a group of assets. And I ain't talking about a P&L. You have been given the
Mhm.
responsibility to steward human assets. And that is so much more about them than it is about you. And if you are
Mhm.
able to shift that thinking, your perspective on all of the things that you have to do as a leader, whether it's feedback or hard decisions, will shift because you can do it with integrity to the humans you are responsible for stewarding.
Yeah. And you may have been where they are, and you may be the expert in what they do, but it is your responsibility to put your ego aside
Yep.
and that idea of, I love to do that, or I can fix it really fast, and allow them to have their moment. And so I think that you're exactly right. So many leaders are given an opportunity and responsibility with no guidebook, no
Yep.
even like,
No, they
here's
don't I mean, even just very practical training. I mean,
yeah.
you and I are here doing some of this work, but there's infinite more work that could be done if companies were open to it. We don't upskill people from individual contributors to managers to leaders, and we're left to figure out on our own, which
Yeah.
is why a lot of times we don't get it right. Well, we're
Yeah.
also humans, but we're never going to get it perfect. But I think a lot of taking that leadership seat is how you look at it.
Yeah. Exactly. And I met this guy one time. He worked at a Fortune 50 company. He was responsible for all of their tools. And I met him one time and I asked him, what's a good day look like? And he goes, when there's a technical issue. And I go, oh, tell me more. And he goes, well, when the escalation happens, I get on the phone and I answer all the questions. And it's great because I'm high enough that I can frame it to the senior leadership so they know what's going on. And I'm able to figure everything out. And I said, well, how do you think that makes your direct reports feel? And he goes, well,
Yep.
they know I'm smarter than them. And I was like, oh my
No
gosh.
comment.
Wow. And so that shows like surmise that he made his way up because he was very technical and he was
Yeah.
very good at what he did. And he missed the leadership stuff
Yes.
because he's
The
not leading.
so you may have just hit a little PTSD because as a former engineer who loves people, I experienced this kind of trauma in a way when I was younger in my career because nobody knew what to do with me. But as somebody who is probably more emotionally intelligent than a lot of like super highly technical people, I am sitting here being led by somebody like that who really should never have, never, and probably never wanted to move into people leadership, but again, was the only pathway to growth they were provided. There's some of that that's changing in corporate America, but not necessarily enough. And then if we're not changing more of that, we need to be doing the upskilling work to equip these people, because that's where micromanagement happens.
Oh my
And
gosh.
most of us, if you've grown through a technical career, you've experienced the fact that because a leader doesn't naturally know how to do that level of work and delegate, they'll hold on and super grip the thing that they know
Yeah.
how to do. And you said something else I think is really important, and this was the main point I wanted to make. I just got myself there finally. The I'm smarter than them. Not only does that make me want to smack you upside the head, whoever that was, however, that mentality is dangerous, not just as a leader, but in all walks of life. And that is a really tricky, slippery slope of a mentality to carry through into modern leadership, because guess what's going to happen? You are going to have people who are smarter than you in their lane, and
Yeah.
that's okay. We're moving
Mhm.
beyond this ecosystem where you've grown through subject matter expertise into leadership and therefore know everything
Yeah.
that your people below you are doing. We're
Yep.
moving beyond that, because a 23-year-old coming on the scenes is always going to know technology better than this analog kid turned digital professional, right?
Yeah.
That's always going to be the case. And so letting go of I'm smarter than them and I know everything and I'm giving them what I think they can do is going to have to change, or you're going to have big issues retaining good talent.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Man, we
And
finally hit the nerve.
yes, I love it. That's good.
Ah.
Yeah, and I remember, diversity is hard. And I remember, one C-level HR professional in some conference or something said, "Diversity is great, but some days I'm like, oh, I just want the team to think like me. It just would be easier." And it's not, she was saying, I know that's not, I was just tired. I'm tired that
Yeah,
day, and it's hard for me, but it's a lot of
yeah,
work. It's a
yeah,
lot of work
yeah.
to hear everybody and understand the perspectives, and that goes right back to feedback too, is their perspective is their reality, even if it's not your intention, that is how they
Mm.
perceive you.
That is why leadership is hard and challenging and also amazing. That was a pretty good summary. Is their perspective is their reality, and it's our responsibilities. Our responsibility as leaders to meet them
Yeah.
there versus forcing them into our
Yes.
reality. Because it's
Yes.
hard to make people think like you, but that's also kind of the point.
Yeah,
Leadership conversations no one prepares you for. We had a few
exactly.
truth bombs in this one today.
We did. I love it. I like it. Should we give our favorite feedback, tips, or do something like that where we're
Sure, why not? Yeah. You go first because I can't think of anything yet.
I'm gonna say, when you get feedback, I think one really great best practice is to write it down verbatim, especially if it's from somebody
Mm,
that you don't respect or unexpected, or, that is totally, according to you, off. It's like you can say, "Hey, I appreciate your feedback. I need some time to process. So can I come back to you? I might have more questions.
yep.
I might, so don't shut the door. Don't respond to it, especially if you know you're triggered. So it's good to understand when you're triggered, and then write it down verbatim before you start to have an analysis paralysis on it, because we'll have revisionist history very quickly about that feedback.
Yeah, revisionist history. There's another topic for another day. However, you queued up the one that I had in my mind, and I think what you just gave is a very specific way or mechanism to prevent reaction. Don't
Mhm.
react, and I mean that both whether you're getting or you're giving. So, don't react to feedback, negative feedback that you get. Like Susie said, write it down so you can review it with a clear head and not emotion. But also, don't give feedback in an emotionally charged moment, because
Yeah,
it will neither be delivered nor received well
yeah,
because you're not capable of doing it. And so,
yeah,
and in general, I'm a big fan of respond instead of react in many places in life. And so it's a good system to train yourself on.
yeah. And even if you believe you're objective, like really, I mean, you really have to, that edginess, if you feel like you're being clear, but you still have that emotion, you absolutely have to give yourself space because
Yes.
it does come across. People know you.
Yep. Totally, totally true.
Yeah.
Leadership lessons no one prepares you for. This one is very much about something I love, and that is being a human.
Yes.
There you go.
Imperfect humans.
Don't forget we're humans, we're imperfect, and that's okay.
Yeah. And you know
There you
what?
go.
We're working in environments that are imperfect as well. And so that's the other thing. Even if we were perfect,
Yep.
we're living in imperfect places. So,
Yep.
and with imperfect people. So you may think
And
you are
that's
perfect, but you're not.
and that is the beauty of the human experience, right? And so don't be afraid to try things. Lead boldly. Be bold in talking to people and asking for support. And my favorite phrase, remember humans still matter.
Yes. I love that.
Another great session of leadership conversations no one prepares you for. How to lead in 2026. Susie, this has been fun. It's always fun to hang out with you and just, by the way, for those of you listening out there, we literally came on here 4 minutes late and we're like, okay, let's talk about something. And Susie says feedback. And I'm like, okay, let's go. So where this really is a sound off. And if there's anything that you would love for us to talk about, burning questions about leadership challenges, a case study, drop one of us or both of us a note here on LinkedIn. We are happy to sound off about it. And I think that's it for today. What do you think, Susie?
That sounds good. And we will not name names. So you're safe
No, we will not.
with us.
Unless you really want us to. Unless you
Yeah,
want
we
us to call
will.
you up on a hot seat, which, hey, that's a whole new level I'm totally willing to go to.
Me too.
Everything remains anonymous until it's not anonymous. So
Yes.
we'll see you next month, third Thursday, for the next Susie and Angie Sound Off leadership conversation no one prepares you for. Reach out if we can support you. Humans still
Yes.
matter.
Yes. Thanks, Ange.
Bye, everybody.